how are you guys doing? Good? My name is István Szeri. I hail from Hungary originally, and then I immigrated to the United States. We are very cognizant of the issues of what accents do we have and when we speak English. So we promise you that we will not speak fast. And if you happen to have a problem with understanding, please let us know. Because you are here to basically get the information and enjoy this meeting. And not to feel that, oh, I don't know what these guys are talking about. We don't know what we are talking about, but what we do. It's a pleasure really to be here, and thank you very much for deciding to come. A couple of people haven't shown up yet, but they will, I assume, or I hope at least. And before I do an introduction on Hippocrates, I would like to ask our host to say a few words about the Hippocrates itself, and I believe that we will talk about a little bit the fact that this is the fourth time that a course has been held here, so it's fantastic. Please.
Good morning. On behalf of Professor Ishiri Guimarães and São João Hospital and IPU, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to Porto to participate in another Hippocrates clinical seminar in the following 3 days. This is fourth one, realized in Porto, being issued this year, neonatal hemodynamics. We will listen lectures presented by excellent international speakers about physiology, clinical research and management of hemodynamics disorders in the preterm and term infant. I want to show gratitude to the lecturers, Drs. István Szeri, Martin Plakov, Con Bryson and Nori Shah. Thank you very much for coming. I want also to thank the local sponsors. Without their contribution, it was very difficult to realize this meeting. I hope you have some time to enjoy our hospitality, our culture and traditions in our city, Porto. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And those who are not here yet, please put up your hands. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to introduce to you the concept, what Hippocrates, the organization, stands for, and it's going to be like a 10-minute presentation. I also would like to make sure that we definitely have a good way to organize the distribution of the evaluation forms. You will receive the evaluation forms on Saturday morning. So, and this is very important because the organization itself is trying to make sure that the quality of the presentations and the speakers is really up to par and appropriate. So I will really ask you to give some thoughts when you fill out the form and put it in there what you really think. It's anonymous, but we track the handwriting. And do the evaluations, just from really from the bottom of your heart, because we need to understand how we can get better. And believe me, there is room for improvement all the time. I also would like to thank for our hosts to make this thing happen here, and I really hope that we are going to enjoy it. Have you guys heard of Hippocrates in general yet? Have you heard of this organization, or did you hear before you decided to come? You have, okay. So Hippocrates stands for International Postgraduate Organization for knowledge transfer, research, and teaching excellent students. It's a little bit convoluted, but Hippocrates comes out this very, very nicely. The whole idea to basically develop and form a structure of international postgraduate education came from George Simbrunner, who I'm sorry for this. anyhow, it's, and let me just do one thing, because this is going to bug us all the time, so I have to try to turn off my, I'm going to disconnect it. And I will be able to do this. I'm sorry for that. Just my Wi-Fi is on, and it's going to ask me every minute whether or not I want to be on the hotel's name or not. So good. So this is done. And so he started out many years ago in his little cottage in the countryside in Austria, and the system has grown into, it has been really extremely successful. It has grown into a huge organization. And you may understand, and you may sort of realize this, that when you get successful, problems always arise, and so you have to be very careful to be able to maintain the quality of what you're trying to do. So here, this slide shows the number of seminars, and you have postgraduate students and nurses. I'm not sure what science is, but you have also some of the other things there. But look at the increase from the early 80s to 2010. We are talking about the number of seminars now are over 20. And if you look at the map, this is where the original sort of IPOKRaTES organization started out and then spread out in Europe and Central America, United States, South America. You also have Asian representation, even in Africa, in two countries. I think it's Egypt and South Africa. And there are now sort of increasing participation sites also in Europe and in India, as well as I think Indonesia. Martin ran a course there last year, I believe. So was it last year? So it really has become successful, and the headquarters is in Mannheim. There's a lady who does this for us in terms of organizing everything, and the CEO is George Sindner, and there's a way that he runs this program, how to design the structure of the presentations, and there are different topics from ventilation to hemodynamics and the rest of the jazz. And so it's really a fantastic system. And then once the program design has been completed for a given year, then there's this program dissemination, and then there's registration, just that you guys have registered. By the way, what's the cost of registration? How much was it? 400 euros. So that's significant. And so you need to get something for that money back. And then there's the local host in our case, our host to have this organization. And then there is a financing and accounting system that has been set up. The reason why I'm telling this to you guys that there is transparency and we have to disclose this information always. And this is about the evaluations. If someone is really bad, you give him or her a 5 as a speaker. If someone is really good, you give that person a 1. And most presenters have received 1 and 2s. Obviously, this is pretty subjective, because you may think that person X is a fantastic speaker, and your colleague next to you thinks that he or she didn't do well. But it's pretty good, because if you look at the standard deviation, actually has significantly decreased over the last 5 years or so in terms of most likely the presentations and the way how we give these talks have become tighter and probably better organized. I hope you will see this, with this course as well. And then there's just a system that you know, if you get an average as a speaker of 1.4, then 60% of you guys will say, oh, it's 1, and 40% would say, oh, it's 2. So this is how it comes out, and there are different ways. Now here is George. George has actually received in 2010 a neonatal education award, and this is Carl Bose here and Judy Ashner who actually gave the award, and Judy has been involved with the organization as well. This is the board of trustees. I don't need to go through this, but you can see that there are prominent people who support this organization. Roberto Renato, who is a Nobel laureate, and there are even neurosurgeons there. We think that they do the best, and hopefully they do. And also there are some people who are from outside the medical organization, a former Minister of Science, the Paramount Capital CEO, etc., etc. And also there have been main sponsors. I don't know who sponsors this event, but you see that there are a number of primary medical companies that are interested in promoting education. By the way, the relationship between us researchers, physicians, educators, and the companies has been significantly regulated, and I think for the better. In the United States, actually, it has become now a hassle. Even they cannot give you a pen. So you cannot accept a pen, and they won't give you a pen from a company. If they come, if there's something happens, then it's a significant problem. And there's the web. Now for us, we uploaded. I only uploaded yesterday my last 2 presentations, but we uploaded the presentations on the website. Have you guys checked it out yet? And is it there? Yes, good. Okay, so then you have now. We also take the liberty to change it a little bit sometimes, and we apologize for that because the last minute maybe the other speaker talked about something that you want to bring something up as well. But most of the presentations, basically the backbone of the presentations, is on the internet. Okay, and you guys have an access to the internet here, and you know the password. Everyone knows the password? No. So it's access HOTEIS, one word. AXIS HOTEIS, and that is both the user name and the password. It's a little bit complicated if you have a Mac to go on it, but you can go on it, after like 7 tries, but it works. It really does work. I see we have the latecomers as well, and they arrived. Okay, good. So that's for the presentation. Now there's one little change that we will have to do with the schedule, and I apologize for that. And the change, what we are going to make is that today's third lecture that was scheduled to be given by Shahan is going to swap with Martin's presentation that was supposed to be done tomorrow in the afternoon on pathophysiology and hemodynamics and management of PPHN. And Martin asked me to tell you that because his mother got really sick, he may need to go back tomorrow in the afternoon to Australia, and we are very sorry. And I just, so this is the only change. By the way, Shahab, I didn't tell you this because I didn't have a chance, I'm sorry. So you will give me this tomorrow. Is Shahab here?
I'm here, yes.
Ready.
What a relief.
Yeah, he's relieved, yeah. Shahab just flew in yesterday from Los Angeles, and he has been up since 1 o'clock in the morning, so he made for over, so over remote there. Anyway, I just want to make sure that you guys get familiar with our speakers. Gorm Grijssen. Gorm Grijssen is from the University of Copenhagen. He's in the back over there. He has done seminal studies on management, on cerebral blood flow, understanding the different techniques, how they work, and methods, as well as significant scientific contributions to the area of neonatal hemodynamics and beyond, I believe so. He is an extremely logical person, and he will tell you when you happen to have the answer wrong, but he will tell you in a nice way, and listen to his talks and his comments because they are extremely valuable. Okay, Martin Kluckow. Martin is an associate professor at the University of Sydney, and he, along with Nick Evans, have been the pioneers of looking at bringing functional echocardiography, although now we call it clinician-performed ultrasound, that system into neonatology. And we will talk about this a little bit during the presentations, because it's very interesting when you bring up a new idea and then other disciplines may feel that you are encroaching in their territory, in this case cardiology. It's been a long 15 plus years, but now I think there is a good understanding that yes, neonatologists, after appropriate training, and appropriate training has to be defined, you should be using ultrasound in the management and the diagnosis of your patients. And so he has contributed to the literature with a great number of papers, and very important papers and provocative papers, and he's a very good speaker, and it's a great fun to have him here. He's also a good sailor. And then Shahab Nouri, in the back there, who is still awake. Shahab is on faculty at the University of Southern California, Children's Hospital Los Angeles, and the LAC USC Medical Center. He is a neonatologist by training, and he has been interested in hemodynamics and organ blood flows and systemic blood flow, and the use of different technologies for as long as he remembers. He hails from originally from Iran. Then he went and he did his medical studies in Hungary, and then he did his postgraduate training in the United States, in Cleveland. Cleveland, is it?
Close enough. Detroit.
Detroit, yeah. So one of those cities you don't really talk about. Sorry, Detroit. And I have a bad joke about the Detroit people, but anyway. And then he did his fellowship at the University of Southern California system, and then he stayed on faculty there. He had a 3-year stint doing 3 years of work at the University of Oklahoma. Now he's back to Southern California. He's an associate professor and an extremely accomplished researcher, and one of the new rising stars in neonatology and neonatal hemodynamics. And then it's me that you are stuck with. As I told you, I am originally from Hungary. I spent the first 33 years of my life there. Then I went to the Karolinska Institute. I spent 2 years there, and then I went to Harvard for 8 years, then the University of Pennsylvania and Children's Hospital of Philadelphia for 8 years, and now I have been for over 10 years at the University of Southern California, Los Angeles. I'm interested in hemodynamics and program development and education, and also in basic and translational and clinical research. We are approachable, and we would love to make sure that when we have the breaks or the evenings when we talk, you guys approach us and we'll discuss things. Happy to send you papers, ideas, anything what you want. That's not a problem. We will give you our email addresses. Okay. So this is the setup. And Paulo, would you want to say 1 or 2 words, because you have actually been so nice to really managing the organization. Please come over here, introduce yourself. And then, and after that, please, I'm going to give the first presentation a little bit shorter.
I haven't prepared anything, but I hope in the name of the organization that several people, especially Gustavo, Beatriz, Susana, and Anna, that will be around here. I hope you feel welcome. I hope if everything is wrong with you, please come to us and tell us that we'll fix the problem. I hope you enjoy our city. Those that are from out of town, take a chance to visit Porto, because I think it worth it. And let's begin the science. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. All right, so everyone has arrived. Fantastic. And you guys are, I understand that the participants are from several countries, many of them from Portugal, from Spain, from Italy, and then from across Europe. And also I think there is someone from Canada here visiting Portugal. And also there's someone from Israel from outside the European zone. So you guys are welcome. Okay, so any questions? And the other thing is, please feel free to ask questions. If you have, if you feel that you have difficulties expressing yourself, don't worry about it. We all have difficulties expressing ourselves. And doesn't matter what accent you have, doesn't matter how you say it, just say it. Just participate, please, okay? Say it in Hungarian if you want to. Right. Also, there are some people from Hungary, I understand, from Page. Okay. All right, so let's then start. And the first presentation, you guys will take a test as well. I'm serious. Okay. The other thing is, guys, would you mind doing this with your phone? Silencing it? Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, so here we are. So I will talk to you a little bit about the principles of cardiovascular physiology to make sure that you know, we have a little foundation, because you will hear a lot of things about cardiac output, myocardial contractility, vasodilation, organ responsiveness, oxygen delivery, autoregulation of brain blood flow. And if you have the foundation, then you will be able to build up on it. This is the only way medicine is interesting. In my view, if you go, when you go to your bedside, to the patient's bedside, and you start thinking in sort of guidelines and silos, or this patient appears to be having this, so this is the guidelines, what I should do, medicine is not going to be fun. It's not going to be fun for your patient. It's not going to be fun for you. And in the United States, the average lifetime of a neonatologist used to be 12 years. They burn out usually after 12 years. This is plus minus. That's the average. Now it's different because of the financial crisis. People actually stay no longer because they can afford not doing it. But this is something that is very, very stressful. Now, are there people here who are not neonatologists? Okay, so this is only a neonatology group. Good, all right. So this is a disclosure statement that we are asked for, required to put up for you, that we don't take gifts from companies and all these things, and we have to fill these things out every year. I think it's important to do so, but I showed it to you. Okay. And let's talk about the primary role of circulation. Who can define for me the primary role of circulation in one sentence? Why do we have a heart that pumps and vessels that actually hold the blood? Gordon.
Because we are too big to absorb air just from the skin, through the skin.
Here you go. Here you go. So an organism that consists of one cell will not have a cardiovascular system. So the way how we define it is that the role of circulation is to deliver oxygen and nutrients, and also to get rid of the byproducts. That's it. And when we are going to talk about shock, your primary goal is to make sure that your patient will be able to meet the oxygen demand of each and every tissue. That's it. That's what you do. No matter, when you talk about medications, this pressure, that flow, nothing else matters. You must be able to match oxygen demand by appropriate delivery of oxygen. And we talked about this yesterday evening that life is such a balance that we try to sort of achieve, and oxygen is a double-edged sword. Oxygen is a substance that we happen to use to actually produce energy, but it's also a toxin. And we have significant problems trying to get rid of the toxic side effects of the oxygen radicals. This is why one of the reasons why we age. Most of our cardiovascular problems and cancers are related to oxidative processes. So we pay a price to be alive, at least for a moment. Anyway, so this is accomplished, the matching of oxygen demand and oxygen delivery, by maintaining a perfusion pressure, appropriate system can control the blood flow. And here I would like to make sure that you also understand that it's not only your macro hemodynamics, it's not only your cardiac output, but also the distribution of the blood flow to the different organs that is extremely important. And we'll talk about the compensated phase and the uncompensated phase of shock later on. Okay? And the major issue is, again, that you have to make sure that the coupling between oxygen demand and delivery is appropriate in your patient. Okay, so you guys have a pen and you guys have a piece of paper, I hope. So jot down some of these, or most of these. There are a couple of equations that I'm going to run through, because then we're going to do a little bit of a fun, okay? So we're going to take a little test, okay? Just to wake up everyone in the morning. So oxygen delivery. Oxygen delivery in the tissues is determined by oxygen carrying capacity and cardiac output. Okay? So this is why whatever your blood is able to hold in terms of oxygen, and whatever your cardiac output is that delivers this blood with the oxygen to your tissues, this is what oxygen delivery to the tissues is all about. Okay? So oxygen carrying capacity times cardiac output. Now, oxygen consumption in the organs is defined by cardiac output, and I will show you the fifth principle, how it is being defined, times the arterial minus the venous oxygen content. In other words, if you take one organ and you have the arterial blood oxygen content going into the organ, and then you measure the venous oxygen content coming out of the organ, the difference is what the organ has consumed. That's pretty simple. Okay. Now, if we're going to define oxygen consumption a little bit in more detail, so I told you that if you do it, you can define it by cardiac output, and then you have the arterial oxygen content times the venous oxygen content. Now, the oxygen bound to hemoglobin is something that is the most important in this equation, because oxygen content of arterial venous blood equals the oxygen bound to hemoglobin and the dissolved oxygen. The dissolved oxygen, which is 0.003 milliliters of oxygen per deciliter torr times the PaO2, it's very minimal. So if you have a PaO2 which is normally like 100 torrs, your dissolved oxygen is going to 0.03 milliliters. Okay, so it's minimal. So when we do the calculation, we actually don't take the dissolved oxygen into consideration. And it's only the oxygen bound to hemoglobin that matters when you look at this. And 1.34 is a factor that adult hemoglobin, not fetal or hemoglobin, that defines the oxygen carrying capacity of adult hemoglobin. I believe so. It's 1.37 for fetal hemoglobin. Shahab, are you here or?
I've just left.
Okay, is this correct? 1.37 for the fetal hemoglobin, the factor versus adult hemoglobin. I think because actually it carries more oxygen. Okay. So anyway, what we use for the calculation is 1.34 milliliters of oxygen per gram of hemoglobin, and then we multiply this by your hemoglobin concentration and the oxygen saturation. And from this equation, you can see really that what really matters is the oxygen saturation. Because if you are 100% saturated and you give 100% oxygen to someone, the PaO2, the partial pressure of oxygen in the artery, may be as high as 600, 400, from 400 to 600, depending on your lung function. But that only will increase the dissolved oxygen. You are already 100% saturated. But if you are only 90% saturated, the oxygen bound to hemoglobin, this equation significantly changes. So as long as your patient is close to 100% saturated in terms of oxygen carrying capacity, you are in a good shape. Now, this leads you back to a couple of things. Please remember, obviously, that we now have an understanding that oxygen is a toxin, and for preterm neonates, inflammation is going to be significantly increased and initiated if you oxygenate these patients beyond the optimum oxygenation level, which we don't know. And so we have to be very careful, but if you use this equation, for instance, for your babies with cyanotic congenital heart disease, you will understand that if they are saturated only 70%, they will carry much less oxygen. So it's a very important point. And then the equation, then, what you can come up with here is that the arteriovenous oxygen difference equals basically the content of oxygen, 1.34 times the hemoglobin concentration, times the difference between the arterial and venous saturation. Okay? And so the Fick principle states, based on this, that you will have your oxygen consumption equals cardiac output in deciliter per minute times 1.34 times your hemoglobin concentration times your arteriovenous oxygen saturation difference. That's it. That's the Fick principle. Okay? So make sure that you jot down this equation. You also know that cardiac output should be, for the calculation purposes, should be in deciliter per minute. Hemoglobin is in grams per deciliter, and arterial and oxygen and venous saturation is percent, but in this case it doesn't matter because it's a fraction. Okay? All right, so this is what it is. So in this case, you express arterial venous oxygen saturation. If it's 90%, it's 0.9. Okay? Because it should be expressed as percent over 100. So 90% of arterial saturation will be 0.9. Venous oxygen saturation will be 0.7, let us say, or 0.6. 0.9 minus 0.6 is 0.3. So they use 0.3 to multiply the hemoglobin concentration and the cardiac output to figure out your oxygen consumption. So Fick principle has been used to determine cardiac output and different measurements. It's a basic equation. And what I would like to do now is go to our sort of more basic cardiovascular physiology principles and talk a little bit about that you understand how complex the system is, okay? And then we will do a little fun test and whatnot. So if you think about the factors that regulate cardiac output, blood pressure, and systemic vascular resistance, is extremely complex. There are neurohormonal factors that will determine the blood volume by making sure that your renal sodium handling is appropriate. Who can tell me the single most important factor that determines our extracellular volume? Single factor. You deal with it every day in the unit. Sodium, very good. Your extracellular sodium content, or your total body sodium content in general. But because most of your sodium is outside your cells, when you assess serum sodium concentration, you will have a decent idea of the total body sodium content. Okay? And that determines how much water your tissues are going to be able to bind. In other words, if you have a lot of sodium on board, you are prone to have more edema. Okay? That's one of the major factors. But please also remember that you have to have a positive sodium balance for a neonate to achieve growth. So it's a tricky thing, and we could go into talking about diuretics and contractional alkalosis and hyponatremia and hypokalemia, which all have a significant role, but indirectly this is all related to hemodynamics as well. So another question that I have, just quickly to the audience, from your serum potassium concentration, can you estimate what the total body potassium content is? No, very good. You cannot, because less than 2% of your total body potassium is outside the cells, since your sodium potassium ATPase enzyme yanks the potassium into the cells and throws sodium out. And so you don't know what your total body potassium content is. Even if your potassium is 4 or 3 or 5 milligrams per liter. You have no clue. And this is an important point if you think about long-term diuretic management, but that's not what I'm going to talk about. But this is just how important renal sodium and water handling is to actually maintain your blood volume. And also your venous compliance, that these two factors will then determine the preload. The preload is the amount of blood that will enter your heart. Okay? And the inotropy of the myocardium and the preload together will determine your stroke volume. Heart rate and stroke volume is cardiac output, and the interplay between SVR and cardiac output will give you the blood pressure. We'll talk about that a little bit more in detail. But this is the simplest way to think of hemodynamics. Now, in order to make sure that you guys wake up, I also show you that sometimes you have to be careful when you are visiting the zoo. And this is a sign that we saw in one of the zoos in the UK. Please be safe. Do not stand, sit, climb, or lean on zoo fences. If you fall, animals could eat you, and that might make them sick. Thank you. So make sure that you are really careful when you are living in the zoo. Okay? So now we talked a little bit about shock and the pathophysiology of shock. Okay? So please listen to this carefully, because this is something that we're going to get back, and if you understand the underlying facts, that you will be able to grasp the management issues as well as the issues with diagnosis, if you remember and understand what shock is. Again, definition of shock, imbalance between oxygen delivery and oxygen consumption. You always get back to this, okay? It's oxygen delivery and oxygen consumption match, or in this case, mismatch. So in this slide you have oxygen consumption on the y-axis and oxygen delivery on the x-axis. And in us here right now sitting in this room and wondering about life, we have a normal range of oxygen delivery and we have a normal range of oxygen consumption. We match our needs really nicely. Okay? This is who we are. Now if we decided to sit in this room for 2 days and we wouldn't drink, then what would happen to us is that we would start having a decrease in our effective circulating blood volume. And then we will have to start doing some compensation that we can meet the oxygen demands of our cells still. And so there's a compensatory range when you look at the oxygen delivery and oxygen consumption equation. And we compensate by increasing oxygen extraction. So your capillaries, the blood flows maybe slower a little bit more, you extract more oxygen, your transit time will increase. Also, since you have less oxygen in the cells, the diffusion gradient is going to increase, so you can kind of extract more oxygen. And this is a very important concept. Remember this because we are going to talk about the use of near-infrared spectroscopy in assessing brain, renal, muscle, and other blood flow. And if you need to understand this concept, because we are using oxygen extraction to indirectly assess flow. What do you guys think? What the relationship is between oxygen extraction and blood flow? Is it an indirect or a direct relationship? So in other words, when your oxygen extraction increases, does your blood flow increase or does your blood flow decrease? So it's an indirect relationship.
Inverse.
Yeah, sorry, inverse. Yeah, thank you. Inverse relationship. So you will have a decreasing blood flow and you compensate by increasing your extraction. Okay? Thank you. You also will increase capillary recruitment. What you're going to do is normally we have many of our capillaries closed because we have enough oxygen and oxygen can travel the distance from the capillary to a cell that is a little bit farther away from this given capillary that is open. When you have less blood flow, less oxygen, then there will be an opening of the closed capillaries so that the cell that used to be farther away from the capillary, with a new capillary being open, now is going to get closer to the source of oxygen. So we actually recruit capillaries as well. And we also do something else which we vasodilate our vessels, but only in our vital organs. Now, vital organ, the way we express it is because there is an understanding that without these organs, the individual will cease existing. So when we ask the medical students what are the vital organs, they say they are the gonads. Okay? And yeah, you say, yeah, at your stage of life, that's the vital organ. But when I said this, actually, an epidemiologist came up to me and said, well, listen, the gonads are vital from a species standpoint. That's a vital organ to sustain the species. From an individual standpoint within the species, the vital organs are the brain, the heart that pumps the blood, and the adrenal glands that provide the hormonal support when you are in a compensated phase of shock or when you are in shock. So those are the three vital organs, your brain, your heart, and your adrenal glands from an individual standpoint. And the vessels in these organs vasodilate when you have problems with oxygen delivery. This is another concept that I would like to make sure that you remember that because we will talk about this, okay? In the other organs, you will vasoconstrict, and there is this regulation most likely because of stretch signal. So when perfusion pressure starts falling, your kidneys, the vessels will know that falling pressure, they respond with vasoconstriction. While in your brain, your vessels will understand that they will vasodilate when perfusion pressure falls. So that's the compensatory regulation. In this compensatory range, you don't have significant evidence of poor tissue perfusion other than decreasing function in non-vital organs. So what would be a good way to look at indirectly if someone is in compensated phase of shock, when you have a patient that is not a 1-day-old neonate, that's a 14-day-old neonate, and there is a change in what that the nurse would come and say, well, this baby over the last 8 hours has, very good, has decreased urine output. And I will show you how the kidneys are extremely sensitive to decreases in oxygen delivery, and they immediately vasoconstrict. Because what percent of the cardiac output goes to the kidneys approximately? So 20% of your cardiac output goes to the kidneys, but sustaining structural integrity and cellular function for the kidneys, you only need 5% of the cardiac output approximately. The rest is for filtering. So the kidneys immediately divert the blood away, and I will show you some pretty cool new data later on during this course, that this indeed happens in the very preterm neonate as well, even when oxygen saturation falls from 95 to 90. The kidneys immediately vasoconstrict. At least we believe they do so. Once you get to a point which is called critical oxygen delivery, you are going to fall out of the normal range of oxygen consumption. You cannot meet anymore the demands of the cells, and you start developing lactic acidosis. And this is the uncompensated phase of shock. Blood pressure falls, and you start producing lactic acid. And you produce lactic acid because you are going to get away from the aerobic metabolism, where you produce 38 moles of ATP, if I correctly remember, for every mole of glucose. And in anaerobic metabolism, you will produce only 2 moles of ATP and 2 moles of lactate. And this is why you would actually follow lactate levels to look at evidence of anaerobic metabolism in the tissues. It's a tricky thing to do, because there is always a timeline here that you have to take into consideration. When a patient falls ill and enters this critical oxygen delivery phase, does not have lactic acidosis yet. Half an hour later it will, or an hour later. Okay? So you have to follow lactic acid levels sequentially. In most places now, at least in the United States, with the blood gas, you also get the lactic acid level, and I'm sure you have the lactate level as well here in Europe and wherever you work. So, but be mindful, because also if a baby was delivered, and the baby had perfusion problems during delivery, this kid is now appropriately adapting. You help the baby by doing whatever you do, and initial gas shows minimal lactic acidosis, and an hour later, you have significant lactic acidosis, yet the baby looks better. What happened? The baby started reperfusing the organs, primarily the non-vital organs, that basically were shut down to the point where oxygen delivery had decreased significantly. So anaerobic metabolism took place. Now you are reperfusing the organs, and you are washing out the lactate that accumulated in the tissues. So increasing lactate levels under certain circumstances may actually be good news. So this is why it's common. And then the last thing that I would like to add to this is that when you give epinephrine to treat septic shock, which is probably one of the better drugs for neonatal medicine in septic shock, you will independently increase lactate production by increasing glucogenolysis. And the baby is going to improve in all measures, flow, pressure, function, yet lactate levels may climb up. I will show some evidence for that, so be mindful. I remember that we almost put a baby on ECMO who had been lingering with bad PPHN and sepsis, and the lactate started increasing suddenly. Well, what we failed to take into consideration that a couple hours before we started epinephrine as well as on this baby. So we initiated the process of putting someone on ECMO when someone said, well, wait, this kid is on epinephrine. So we took the epinephrine off, we increased the dopamine to 50 or whatever micrograms per kilogram. We need to see what happens. Lactate level in half an hour normalized, guys. Kid never went on ECMO. So we almost exposed someone to something that we should not have. So remember that as well for the lactates, okay? Now here we have for you, this is just to discuss and basically summarize what I'm talking about, is that for neonatal shock, there are three major factors that play a role. And also, please remember that a combination of these factors may actually contribute to the compromised circulation. So you have hypovolemia, you have cardiogenic shock, and you have distributive shock. So hypovolemia is the problem that we all think all of our babies have, because what's the first response when we get to a patient and then we understand and realize that the patient's perfusion is worse than it should be, there's evidence of poor tissue perfusion, we automatically give volume. That's what we do. Sometimes we are right, more than less we are probably wrong. But we give volume. Okay? It's very difficult to determine, actually it's probably impossible at the moment, the correct effective circulating blood volume, how much a patient needs at that time. And so we give saline most of the time, which is an unbalanced solution. There's a lot of, obviously when you give a lot of saline, you will increase chloride, and hyperchloremia associated acidosis is a problem. So if you give enough saline boluses, you may develop acidosis, but it's because of hyperchloremia. Okay? And it has been shown in adults that it actually even affects DNA stability. Now, we don't have a better way to approach this question at the moment. Lactated ringer has not been studied rigorously, and it has some potassium in it, and everyone is concerned that if a patient is in, well, let's say, a compensated or uncompensated phase of shock, then you start giving the person potassium, the kidneys may not recover, and you will have a problem with hyperkalemia. Yes, Gordon?
Eastern, could you say briefly, what is the mechanism of acidosis, hyperchloremic acidosis?
Yep.
How fast does it develop, and what are the shifts?
Yeah, so hyperchloremic acidosis doesn't develop fast. And hyperchloremic acidosis is basically the opposite of hypochloremic contraction alkalosis that you guys often see, but it's complex. Both are very complex. When you give Lasix, when you have given Lasix chronically. With chloride, intracellular chloride content increasing, the cells maintain an ionic balance, so they will have less bicarbonate. And so it starts developing a shift, and you will have more and more chloride inside the cells and less bicarbonate. And this intracellular acidosis is what leads to some of these problems. It doesn't develop in 2 minutes. If you give 2 or 3 or 4 boluses, you will not have it. So that's a very important point that you said. For the opposite, if you are not replacing the lost chloride, for instance, if someone is on Lasix, on furosemide, for every 2 chlorides, you only lose 1 sodium and 1 potassium, because you inhibit the 2 chloride sodium potassium cotransporter, okay, by Lasix, by furosemide. So what happens is that even if you say, well, I'm replacing some potassium, also replace some of the losses with sodium, which is a question because I told you that that total body potassium determines how much water you're going to find. But you are not going to be able to match the chloride losses. You will develop intracellular hypochloremia, more bicarbonate is going to be inside the cells. And interestingly, hypochloremic intracellular alkalosis slows the cell cycle, and cells won't divide as fast. In other words, babies don't grow. And in the 80s, when we used to give Lasix to everyone, nurses, ourselves, and the babies, we were wondering, because then babies started surviving with BPD, because we ventilated babies with squared form waveforms and all these things. They started surviving though, despite our management, but it wouldn't grow. I remember giving them 33 or 35 kcals per ounce of formula instead of the 22, 24 to try to make them grow. Until someone figured out that, hey, you guys are stupid. We used to run the chloride in the 80s, sodium chloride, it's okay. Now we are, so what we are doing right now, for instance, for chronic Lasix administration, and it's another story whether or not we should routinely use Lasix. It's another story, and I'm not telling you that what you should do, what you should not do. But in appropriate cases, if you use it for a long time, we specifically replace arginine chloride. So we don't bring in more sodium, but we bring in more chloride. Because remember, for every 2 chloride that you lose when you give Lasix, you only lose 1 sodium and 1 potassium. Okay? All right, but we are tracking away from this. So, hypovolemia, we believe that everyone is hypovolemic. Cardiogenic shock, in order to really have a good understanding whether or not the baby has a cardiogenic shock, you have to be able to study the heart. And this is what you're going to hear about as well quite a lot. A distributive shock is when you have dysregulated increase or decrease in vascular resistance. Now in septic shock, for instance, you have locally increased dysregulated nitric oxide production and you vasodilate like crazy. Okay, and this is when you give the vasoconstrictive medications in septic shock. In little babies, there is always a question whether or not their autonomic nervous system is appropriately developed. So can they really regulate their systemic vascular resistance appropriately? Okay, so that's of course an issue. And many times you have the combination. For instance, in early cases of septic shock in neonates, you will have an increased myocardial performance and contractility with significant vasodilation. Couple of days down the road, myocardial function will be affected. And I believe Shahab is going to show you a patient with severe fulminant necrotizing enterocolitis. Do you have that patient, Shahab?
No, I will have it.
You will have it. Good. Which is, it's fantastic. It's amazing. Unfortunately, the patient died, but that is a fantastic thing. Anyway, so that's what it is. Now going back, and this is the last slide, and we're going to take the test. Going back to the compensated phase of shock and the different phases. We talked about the compensated phase. Remember, blood pressure is in the normal range, whatever the normal blood pressure range is, and we will have a talk on that. You will have a neuroendocrine regulation that will then vasoconstrict your non-vital organs, vasodilate your vital organs. You will sustain oxygen delivery to the cells in your vital organs appropriately. Your non-vital organs can withstand quite a lot of this insult, and then you may be able to get out of this. Okay? So that's the compensated phase of shock. The first postnatal day, so far we have not been able really to define someone in the compensated phase of shock. Because later on, one of the most valuable findings is that you look at cardiac urine output change. But urine output doesn't tell you anything in the first postnatal day. What is the urine output of a fetus in between 30 and 40 weeks gestation in utero? What's the urine output? What do you guys think? It's 10 to 15 cc's per kilo per hour. 10 to 15 cc's per kilo per hour. That's the normal urine output of a 30 to 40 week fetus. And the first postnatal day, as we adapt, what's the urine output usually? 1 to 2 cc's per kilo per hour. So now is this a normal physiologic response that the baby is not peeing much? Or is the baby getting sicker? We don't know. So one of the talks that we will also focus on an ability to being able to diagnose shock in the early phases during transition. Okay, when the compensative mechanisms fail, then you will get into this uncompensated phase when you drop your perfusion pressure and blood flow to the vital organs. Again, brain, heart, and adrenal glands is also going to decrease, and you're going to start developing lactic acidosis. And then the irreversible phase is what hopefully we don't see in our patients. Okay, so I'm not going to go beyond this. Is the last slide, and then we'll have the test taken. Let me make sure that I have only 5 minutes left, which is not good. Okay, so this is going to be 5 more minutes, and then the test, and then we are done. Okay. All right. So. Please look. Remember this slide. This slide will come back over and over again. This is basically summarizing what we've talked about. So you want to meet oxygen demand in the cells. How do we accomplish this? We accomplish this by delivering oxygen with appropriate to maintain systemic blood flow. Okay. Now, in this equation, when we talk about blood pressure equals cardiac output times vascular resistance, the independent variables are systemic vascular resistance and systemic blood flow. And the product of this equation, the dependent variable from a mathematical standpoint, is blood pressure. I would like to point out that systemic blood flow is not a fully independent variable as well, as Shahab astutely pointed out to me a couple of years ago. Because at certain vascular resistance changes, the myocardium may not, for instance, be able to pump against a very high resistance, so your systemic blood flow may also be affected. But in general, if you think about this, these two variables that are being regulated will determine blood pressure. And the problem is that this is the only variable that we can monitor in absolute numbers continuously. So now you are going to make a decision that the blood pressure is this or that, and then you're going to initiate a treatment, but the blood pressure may be low because systemic vascular resistance is too low, and systemic blood flow may be even high because it compensates for it, but your blood pressure is still low. And in this case, if you give the patient an inotrope, doesn't need it. It needs a vasopressor. It can be the other way around. It can be a poor cardiac output, compensation and compensatory increase in systemic vascular resistance. If in that case you give a vasopressor, you will basically harm the patient. In that case, you probably need a lucitrope, something that will, a medication that will increase myocardial contractility and will decrease vascular resistance. The blood pressure is the same in both cases. So this is why it is not enough to look at blood pressure only. And you guys have been trying to look at systemic perfusion by looking at capillary refill time, urine output. Heart rate is basically useless in neonatology, unfortunately, in most cases. Because it's affected by so many factors that we really don't understand. Now, if you think about heart rate variability, it's a different thing, but we don't analyze that, unfortunately, routinely. There was a paper published that changes in heart rate, actually several papers, changes in heart rate variability are pretty good predictors, for instance, for impending septic shock. I was in pediatrics last year, 2 years ago. And there are some papers. The problem is that we don't analyze variability routinely, and you cannot look at it and say just, okay, this is the strip I got. You have to have an appropriate computer analysis to do that. Okay? But anyway, so please remember this. And the resistance is affected by a lot of factors, and so is your systemic blood flow. So monitoring blood pressure we can do. But also I tell you that we have now a better idea how to monitor systemic blood flow using echocardiography, using something which is called impedance relative cardiometry, and we will talk about this for pressure waveform analysis. We are trying to work on this system as well, but we haven't made any headways yet. And then we can use indirect monitoring systems for systemic vascular resistance assessment, using laser Doppler or visible light technology when you try to look at local peripheral blood flow. The problem is that that's indirect. So right now what we have about, when we talk about vascular resistance, we assess blood flow and blood pressure, we know, and then we say, okay, pressure over cardiac output, this is our SVR. So this is how we calculate it. We cannot really directly measure it. But beyond the macro hemodynamics, I talked to you about it, that the blood flow distribution is also extremely important. Since this is the way how we can figure out if a patient is in compensated or uncompensated shock. Blood pressure is still okay, but you have your non-vital organ distribution is inappropriate, abnormal, because you're vasoconstricted, then you are already in compensated phase. And if you could treat a patient in that situation, you would be much better off. And we can monitor those things as well, and then here's how we regulate it by capillary recruitment, oxygen extraction increases, and also you can look at something where you say, okay, I'm going to also look at function of the brain. And you might use something like, which is fairly simple, amplitude integrated EEG. A neurologist would scoff at it. They say, that is a joke. But the 4 simple patterns that you can establish on that, and that may be useful. Actually, there are some studies suggesting that they have some predictive values when you look at amplitude integrated EEG changes, okay? So I think it's important. For us, we don't need amplitude integrated EEG because if I get into a good compensated phase of shock and then I'm starting sliding down, I would keel over. I would faint. You know that my brain doesn't work right. My brain doesn't work right anyway, but that's enough. All right, so I came to Portugal and I wanted to pay with our dollar bill, but they didn't accept it because this is the bill that I use, and they said, well, you know, you may not be able to get it. Okay, so let me go and let us go to the to our test, okay? And then we are. Alright, here we are. So this is the question, and we are done with this. What is this cardiac output, systemic blood flow, in a 3-day-old, 1 kilogram, 27 weeks gestation preterm neonate? It is arterial and venous oxygen saturations are 85 and 45% respectively. Remember, you need to use 0.85 and 0.45, okay, when you calculate. His oxygen consumption is 53.6 deciliters per kilogram per minute. His hemoglobin is 10 grams per deciliter, and the ductus arteriosus is closed. That's the first question. Yes?
Istvan, it couldn't be 53.6 deciliters. It must be milliliters. No, it must be 0.5. You should say that oxygen consumption is about 5 to 10 milliliters per kilo per minute. So there's something with the decimal point.
Yeah. No. Okay, right. So it's 0.53.
0.53 milliliters.
Yes. So it's 50. Yeah. It's deciliter is 100 per milliliter. So it's 0.53.
0.5.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. 0.5. So the same numbers. But it's only can say milliliters per kilogram per minute. But this should be milliliter, okay? And here you have the cardiac output answers that you can have. Okay? So A, B, C, D, or E. And if the patient's mean blood pressure, question number 2, is 37, is this baby in uncompensated, compensated shock, or not in any kind of cardiovascular compromise? And the normal range for cardiac output is 150 to 250, which is what we believe for cardiac output. So can you guys calculate this using the equation from the Frick principle? Apparently I couldn't because I mixed up the units. So you have 2 more minutes and that's it. And then you come in and 10 minutes. Okay, guys. You guys done? So what's the answer? Anyone come up with some? Yeah, okay guys, so what's the answer? What's the answer? B. Very good. The answer is B. And if it's B, then is this patient in shock, in compensated or uncompensated, or shock or no shock? Very good. Very good. Very good. You guys solved the problem better than I did. Thank you for pointing out the decimal problems. Okay. So, but this is, this is something that you can. This is why, if you remember the FIT principle, it is basically just understanding that you have to figure out. You're gonna be able to figure out the oxygen extraction, the oxygen consumption in an organ by having a good understanding what the ingoing oxygen content of the blood is and the outgoing oxygen content of the blood is. If you know then the cardiac output and you use the appropriate factor, the 1.34 in adult, and I think it's 1.37 for fetal hemoglobin, then you can calculate these equations. I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to ask now Martin to talk about functional echocardiography. We are going to shift a little bit, and the break will be at 10:30, guys, okay? Not at 10:20, all right? Okay, I apologize for that. The sound doesn't work. I tried that one.